Your breath is the bridge between dimensions. Each inhale connects you to infinite possibilities. Each exhale releases old timelines. But if you're like most people, you've been unconsciously breathing yourself into the same limited reality for years, wondering why nothing ever changes. The universe responds to your breath's electromagnetic signature, not your mental chatter. And here's what's happening in your body right now that you're completely unaware of. Your autonomic nervous system is broadcasting a signal to the quantum field 24/7. That signal is either saying, I'm safe, I'm abundant, I'm whole, or I'm in danger, I'm lacking, I'm broken. And that broadcast, it's happening through your breathing rhythm. Every shallow, anxious breath is literally telling the universe, I don't have enough, while every deep, coherent breath declares, I am whole. But here's what changes everything. Today I'm going to give you the exact breathing sequence that billionaires, mystics, and quantum physicists use to access what I call timeline coherence. You'll learn how to identify which reality frequency you're currently locked into, and then I'll show you the 3-step process to breathing yourself into any timeline you choose, including the one where you already have everything you've ever wanted. Most people are unknowingly breathing themselves into the same limited timeline, day after day, and wondering why nothing in their life ever changes. I want you to imagine something with me for a moment. Picture yourself as a radio, and every breath you take is adjusting your frequency dial. Most of us learn to breathe in a particular rhythm during times of stress, uncertainty, or survival, and we've been unconsciously tuning into that same station ever since. We wake up, take those familiar shallow breaths of morning anxiety, and without realizing it, we've just selected today's reality channel. The same one we listened to yesterday and the day before that. Here's what I've discovered in my own journey and what quantum physics is now confirming. There isn't just one reality unfolding around you. There are infinite parallel timelines, each one vibrating at a different frequency, each one containing a different version of your life. In one timeline, you're confident and abundant. In another, you're creative and free. In yet another, you're deeply loved and supported. These aren't fantasies or future possibilities. They're actual realities existing right now, just at frequencies your current breathing pattern can't access. But here's where it gets both fascinating and heartbreaking. Your nervous system, through your breathing rhythm, acts like a quantum antenna. Every inhale and exhale sends out a specific electromagnetic signature that tells the universe, this is the timeline I'm choosing to experience. When you breathe in that familiar pattern of worry, your body is essentially saying, give me more of the reality where I need to worry. When you hold your breath in anticipation of disappointment, you're selecting the timeline where disappointment is likely. I remember when this first clicked for me. I was sitting in my car after another frustrating day, taking those same tight, anxious breaths I'd been taking for years, when I suddenly realized I wasn't breathing like someone whose life was about to change. I was breathing like someone who expected more of the same, and the universe, being the perfect mirror it is, kept delivering exactly that. The timeline trap is so subtle because breathing is automatic. We don't think about it, we just do it. But every unconscious breath is a vote for the reality we've always known, even if it's not the reality we want. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish between a past trauma and a current situation. It just responds to the breathing pattern you've trained it to recognize as normal. This is why so many beautiful, intelligent, deserving people feel stuck despite trying everything. They're using their minds to reach for new realities while their breath keeps them anchored to old ones. They're trying to manifest from their thoughts while their nervous system is broadcasting a completely different message through their respiratory rhythm. But here's what's even more shocking. You've actually been doing manifestation backwards this entire time, and once you understand why, everything changes. What I'm about to show you will completely shatter everything you believe about how manifestation actually works, because it's not happening in your mind. For years, I believed what most of us have been taught, that manifestation was about getting my thoughts right, visualizing perfectly, and affirming with enough conviction. I spent countless mornings in meditation, crafting vision boards, and repeating mantras while my life remained frustratingly unchanged. I thought I wasn't trying hard enough, wasn't believing deeply enough, wasn't holding the vision clearly enough. But I was missing the most fundamental piece of the puzzle. Your nervous system is the real conductor of your reality orchestra, and it responds to your breath faster than your brain can even form a thought. While you're up in your head, carefully crafting positive affirmations, your autonomic nervous system is down in your body, reading the electromagnetic signature of your breathing pattern and making split-second decisions about which timeline to collapse into your experience. Here's what was happening to me and what might be happening to you. I would sit down to visualize abundance, breathing in that familiar shallow way that my body had learned during years of financial stress. My mind was painting beautiful pictures of prosperity, but my nervous system was receiving a very different message through my breath. Danger, scarcity, brace for impact. And guess which signal the quantum field was actually receiving? Not my carefully crafted visualization, but the distress signal coming through my respiratory system. Think of it this way. Your mind speaks one language, but the universe listens to another. Your thoughts might be saying, "I am worthy of love," while your breath is whispering, "I'm not safe to be seen." Your affirmations might declare, "Money flows to me easily," while your breathing pattern broadcasts, "Resources are scarce and I must fight for survival." The quantum field doesn't hear your words, it reads your energy. And that energy signature is written primarily in the rhythm and depth of your breath. This is why traditional manifestation techniques often feel like pushing a boulder uphill. You're trying to override millions of years of evolutionary programming with conscious thought alone. Your nervous system evolved to keep you alive, and it takes its cues from your body's signals, not your mental intentions. When your breathing pattern matches the frequency of stress, survival, or limitation, your nervous system dutifully creates more experiences that validate those states, regardless of what your mind is trying to manifest. I remember the exact moment this became crystal clear to me. I was in the middle of a powerful abundance meditation, really feeling connected to the vision of my dream life, when I noticed my breath was tight and shallow, exactly how I breathed when checking my empty bank account. My mind was in the penthouse, but my nervous system was in the basement, and the universe was responding to the basement frequency. The beautiful irony is that your breath has been your manifestation tool all along. Every spiritual tradition has known this. Every ancient practice has emphasized breathwork. But somehow, in our modern approach to manifestation, we've forgotten the bridge between intention and reality. This is why so many people struggle. They're literally working against their own nervous system, trying to think their way into new realities while breathing themselves back into old ones. If you've been trying to think your way into abundance while your nervous system is still breathing from survival mode, you're literally encoding scarcity into the quantum field with every exhale. Let me share something that completely changed how I understood why my manifestation efforts kept backfiring. I was at a workshop about abundance, surrounded by successful entrepreneurs, feeling inspired and ready to transform my financial reality. The facilitator guided us through a powerful visualization about money flowing effortlessly into our lives. I was all in, mentally creating this beautiful vision of prosperity and freedom. But then something strange happened. As I sat there, imaging abundance, I noticed my breath was short and tight. My shoulders were hunched, my jaw was clenched. Despite my mind being focused on wealth, my body was breathing the exact same pattern I used when paying bills I couldn't afford, when checking my bank balance with dread, when lying awake at 3 a.m. worrying about money. Here's what I discovered that day. Your breathing pattern creates what scientists call an electromagnetic signature. This isn't metaphysical theory, it's measurable physics. Your heart rate variability, your brainwave patterns, your cellular voltage all shift based on how you breathe. When you breathe from anxiety, your entire being generates the electromagnetic frequency of lack. When you breathe from peace, you generate the electromagnetic frequency of abundance. Think of your breath as a radio transmitter, constantly broadcasting to the quantum field. Stress breathing sends out a very specific signal. I don't have enough. I'm not safe. Resources are limited. This signal doesn't just affect your mood, it literally programs your reality by telling the field which experiences to deliver. Your nervous system reads this electromagnetic pattern and says, "Okay, we're in scarcity mode. Let me create more situations that validate this frequency." But here's where it gets really fascinating and a little heartbreaking. Most of us learned our breathing patterns during our most challenging times. Maybe you were 8 years old listening to your parents fight about money, and your little nervous system learned to breathe in a way that said, "Money equals stress." Or perhaps you were a teenager facing rejection, and your breath learned to carry the frequency of "I'm not enough." These patterns became so automatic that now, decades later, even when you're consciously trying to manifest abundance or love, your breath is still broadcasting those old emergency signals. The quantum field doesn't judge these signals as good or bad. It simply responds with matching experiences. If your breath says scarcity, you get more situations that feel scarce. If your breath says unworthiness, you attract experiences that confirm unworthiness. The field is exquisitely calibrated to give you exactly what your electromagnetic signature is requesting, regardless of what your mind thinks it wants. This is why mixed signals create what quantum physicists call interference patterns. Imagine trying to tune into a beautiful radio station while someone else is broadcasting static on the same frequency. Your positive thoughts are trying to reach one timeline while your anxious breath is pulling you toward another. The result? Confusion, inconsistent results, and that frustrating feeling of, "I'm doing everything right, but nothing's changing." I see this pattern everywhere now. People doing abundance affirmations while holding their breath in financial anxiety. People visualizing love while breathing in the shallow pattern of past heartbreak. People declaring health while their breath carries the electromagnetic signature of stress and overwhelm. Now here's where it gets life-changing. Once you understand this next principle, you'll never approach manifestation the same way again. Here's the breakthrough moment that changes everything. When you realize every conscious breath is you choosing which version of reality becomes real. And most people are choosing unconsciously. I'll never forget the morning this clicked for me. I was standing in my kitchen about to start another day of the same routine, when I suddenly became aware of my breathing, not trying to change it, just noticing it. And what I discovered shocked me. I was breathing like someone who expected a difficult day. Short, shallow breaths that seemed to say, "Here we go again." In that moment, I realized I had been unconsciously voting for the same reality, breath by breath, for years. What quantum physics has shown us through the observer effect is profound. The act of conscious observation actually collapses infinite possibilities into a single experience. But here's what most people miss. You're not just observing with your eyes or your thoughts. You're observing with your entire being. And your breath is the most powerful observation tool you have. Every time you take a conscious breath, you're essentially reaching into the quantum field and selecting which of the infinite parallel realities becomes your lived experience. When you breathe consciously from a place of peace, you're observing and therefore collapsing the timeline where peace is possible. When you breathe consciously from a place of abundance, you're selecting the reality where abundance flows naturally. But most of us have been breathing unconsciously, which means we've been selecting unconsciously. We wake up and immediately slip into automatic breathing patterns that were formed during stress, trauma, or limitation. These unconscious patterns act like a broken record player, selecting the same limited experiences over and over again. I started experimenting with this in small ways. Before important phone calls, instead of taking my usual anxious breath, I would pause and breathe consciously from the version of myself who felt confident and relaxed. The difference was immediate and startling. Not only did I feel different, but people responded to me differently. Opportunities began showing up, conversations flowed more easily. The science behind this is fascinating. When you breathe consciously, you're literally changing your brainwave patterns, your heart rate variability, and your electromagnetic field. These changes don't just affect you, they affect how the quantum field responds to you. You become a different observer, and therefore you collapse different possibilities. Here's a practical example of how this works. Imagine you're about to walk into a job interview. If you breathe unconsciously from anxiety, the way you've always breathed in stressful situations, you're essentially observing from the timeline where job interviews are threatening and success is uncertain. Your nervous system prepares for battle, your energy becomes contracted, and you collapse experiences that match that frequency. But if you pause and take 3 conscious breaths from the version of yourself who already knows they're valuable and capable, you're observing from a completely different timeline. You're collapsing possibilities where the interview flows naturally, where your talents are recognized, where the right opportunities align. The quantum field responds to the observer, and the observer is you breathing consciously in this moment. This is why ancient traditions always emphasized breathwork as a spiritual practice. They understood something we're just beginning to rediscover. Breath is the bridge between consciousness and reality creation. What changed everything for me was realizing that I didn't have to wait for my circumstances to change to start breathing differently. I could start breathing as the version of myself who already lived the life I wanted, and watch as reality began to reorganize itself around that frequency. The most beautiful part is that this isn't something you have to perfect. Every conscious breath is a choice point, a moment where you can shift timelines. Even if you've been breathing unconsciously for years, the next breath you take can be the one that selects an entirely new reality. And this leads us to the core truth that will transform how you see everything. You are not a victim of your circumstances, but a conscious chooser of your reality through every breath you take. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you breathe. And if your breathing pattern hasn't changed, neither will your life. This revelation hit me like lightning during what I thought would be just another ordinary Tuesday. I was having coffee with a friend who had been working on manifesting a loving relationship for over 2 years. She had read every book, attended workshops, created vision boards, and could recite affirmations in her sleep. Yet she kept attracting the same type of emotionally unavailable partners. As she spoke about her latest dating disappointment, I noticed something striking. She was breathing in the exact same pattern as when she talked about her childhood wounds around abandonment. Short, guarded breaths that seemed to say, "I want love, but I'm not safe to receive it." Her words were about openness and partnership, but her breath was broadcasting walls and protection. That's when I understood the missing piece that no one talks about in attraction work. We've been taught that like attracts like, but what we haven't been told is that your breathing pattern is your most honest communication with the universe. Your thoughts might lie, your words might be carefully chosen, but your breath tells the truth about what frequency you're actually living in. Your current breathing pattern is like a signature that you've been unconsciously writing across every moment of your life. If you breathe like someone who expects struggle, the universe reads that signature and delivers more situations that require struggle. If you breathe like someone who feels unworthy, you'll magnetize experiences that confirm unworthiness, no matter how many times you repeat, "I am worthy" in the mirror. I started paying attention to the breathing patterns of people in my life, and the correlations were undeniable. My friend who always breathed with urgency and tension constantly attracted chaotic last-minute situations. My colleague who breathed with deep, steady rhythms seemed to effortlessly attract calm, supportive experiences. The successful entrepreneur in my network breathed with a particular expansive quality that matched the expansive opportunities that flowed to him naturally. Here's how you can identify your own reality frequency right now. Simply observe your natural breathing pattern without changing it. Are you breathing like someone who trusts life to support them? Or like someone who's always bracing for the next challenge? Is your breath the rhythm of someone who feels abundant, or someone who's managing scarcity? Your honest assessment will reveal which timeline you've been unconsciously selecting. The reason changing thoughts without changing breath fails is because thoughts happen in your mind, but reality creation happens through your nervous system. Your nervous system doesn't speak English or any human language. It speaks electromagnetic frequency, and that frequency is generated primarily through your breathing rhythm, heart rate variability, and overall nervous system state. I watched my friend experiment with breathing as if she were already in the loving relationship she desired. Not forcing it, just allowing her breath to carry the electromagnetic signature of someone who felt deeply loved and safe. Within weeks, her entire energy shifted. People started responding to her differently. And yes, she eventually attracted the kind of partnership she'd been seeking. But more importantly, she became the kind of person who was naturally magnetic to love. So how do you make the ultimate shift? This is where the magic happens, where you stop trying to override your frequency and start embodying it. The moment you stop forcing your breath and start breathing from the version of you that already has everything, that's when the quantum field stops resisting and starts rearranging reality around your new frequency. I learned this lesson the hard way during what I now call my breathing boot camp phase. I had become obsessed with breathing techniques, spending hours each day doing elaborate breathwork patterns I'd learned from various teachers. 4 counts in, hold for 7, out for 8. Box breathing, fire breathing, circular breathing, you name it, I tried it. I was approaching breath like a military drill, forcing my nervous system into submission, trying to muscle my way into a different reality. But something felt off. Despite all this intensive breath work, my life wasn't shifting the way I expected. I was getting good at the techniques, but the underlying frequency of my being remained unchanged. That's when I discovered the profound difference between forced breathing and embodied breathing, and why the quantum field responds so differently to each. Forced breathing is when you use techniques to override your natural rhythm, trying to impose a different state onto your nervous system. It's like trying to speak a foreign language by shouting louder instead of learning the actual words. Your nervous system might comply temporarily, but it doesn't integrate the new frequency because it doesn't believe the change is real. Embodied breathing, on the other hand, is when you breathe as if you already are the person living your desired reality. It's not about technique. It's about identity. It's not about forcing your breath into a pattern. It's about allowing your breath to naturally express the frequency of your future self. Here's how I discovered the difference. One morning, instead of launching into my usual breathing routine, I simply asked myself, how does the version of me who already has everything breathe? I didn't think about it analytically. I just imagined that version of myself, confident, abundant, deeply loved, and I allowed my breath to naturally find their rhythm. What happened was extraordinary. My breath naturally settled into a pattern I had never consciously learned. Deeper, slower, with a quality of complete trust and relaxation. It wasn't forced or practiced. It was authentic. And for the first time, I felt the quantum field responding, not resisting, not neutral, but actively cooperating with this new frequency I was embodying. The key insight is this: the quantum field doesn't respond to effort, it responds to authenticity. When you force your breath, the field senses the underlying tension and continues to mirror back struggle. But when you breathe authentically as your future self, the field recognizes the coherent signal and begins to rearrange reality to match that frequency. So how do you access this embodied breathing? Start by connecting with your future self, not as a fantasy, but as a very real aspect of who you are. This version of you already exists in the quantum field. They're not stressed about money because they live in abundance. They're not anxious about love because they're deeply cherished. They're not worried about health because they feel vital and alive. Take a moment right now and feel into that version of yourself. Don't think about them, feel them. What does their energy feel like in your body? How do they hold themselves? What's the quality of their presence? Now, without forcing anything, allow your breath to naturally express their state of being. Notice how they breathe. Is it deeper, slower, more relaxed? Let your body remember this rhythm. This is not a technique you do once. This is a way of being you gradually embody. Throughout your day, whenever you remember, gently ask yourself, how would my future self breathe in this moment? And then simply allow your breath to find that frequency. The beautiful paradox is that the more you stop trying to force change and start embodying the change, the faster the external world responds. You're no longer broadcasting mixed signals, you're speaking the clear, coherent language that the quantum field understands and cooperates with. When you breathe as your future self, you're not pretending or faking, you're remembering who you truly are beneath all the conditioning and limitations. And the field, recognizing this authentic frequency, joyfully rearranges itself to support this new reality. Let me bring this all together so you can start using this immediately, because your next breath is your next opportunity to choose which version of reality becomes real. Remember, your breath is literally your bridge between dimensions. Stop trying to think your way into abundance while breathing from limitation. Instead, breathe as the version of yourself who already lives in the reality you desire. The revelation is profound. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you breathe. Your breathing pattern is your electromagnetic signature. But when you stop forcing techniques and start breathing from your future self's identity, the quantum field stops resisting and starts cooperating, rearranging reality around your authentic frequency. You are not waiting for your life to change. You are breathing yourself into the version of reality where it already has. This is your moment-to-moment practice. Every conscious breath is an opportunity to select a different timeline. When you breathe as your future self, you're embodying the authentic frequency of who you truly are beneath all conditioning. You've always had the ability to shift realities. You just needed to understand the bridge between consciousness and manifestation. Now that you understand the breath bridge, the next piece is mastering the silent observer matrix, which amplifies your breathing technique by 5,000 times. When you learn to witness without reacting, you become the kind of observer who can collapse any reality into existence. This consciousness technology transforms breathing from a practice into pure quantum mastery, where you realize you are the field awakening to its own creative power. Your journey begins here. Every breath you take consciously from your future self's frequency is you actively participating in reality creation. You're no longer a passive recipient, but a conscious collaborator with the quantum field. Take 3 conscious breaths right now as your future self. Feel the electromagnetic shift. Notice how the field responds. Your new timeline begins with your next breath.